The whole churchyard went quiet when the cowboy dragged an empty bench across the dirt and placed it beside the woman everyone else had spent the afternoon avoiding. Forks stopped moving. Mothers pulled their children closer. Even Reverend Warren stopped talking near the church steps. The stranger seemed to notice every hard stare, but he did not turn away. He only looked at the lonely woman in the faded blue dress and said, "There's a place beside me." No one in Cedar Hollow understood why a man who had arrived only minutes earlier would risk the anger of an entire town for a woman accused of helping ruin half their families. The summer church supper was the biggest gathering of the year in Cedar Hollow, Wyoming territory. Long wooden tables filled the churchyard beneath tall cottonwoods. Fried chicken, baked beans, cornbread, apple pies, and jars of preserves covered white cloths that moved gently in the warm wind. Ranchers came in clean shirts. Miners washed the dust from their faces. Children chased one another near the hitching posts, while women carried dishes from wagon beds. Rachel Bennett stood outside the gate, holding a jar of wild plum preserves against her chest. She had almost turned around twice on the road from her cabin. Her older brother, Jacob, had been buried only 7 days earlier. 3 days after his death, Sheriff Warren Holt had announced that Jacob had stolen more than $900 from the Cedar Hollow Miners Relief Fund. Jacob had worked as a clerk for the town bank. Everyone knew he had access to the books. Everyone also knew the missing money had been discovered the morning after his body was found at the bottom of Red Hawk Pass. The sheriff called it guilt followed by suicide. Rachel called it impossible. But no one wanted to hear her. She entered the churchyard. Mrs. Edna Parker noticed her first. The older woman had been setting plates near the center table. When Rachel approached, Edna quietly picked up her basket and moved to the far end. Then another family moved. Then another. No one shouted at Rachel. That almost made it worse. People simply created space around her. By the time Rachel placed her jar on the table, nearly 8 feet of empty bench surrounded her. She sat down alone. Her hands rested in her lap, while conversation slowly returned around her. Rachel stared at the church doors and reminded herself why she had come. Jacob had loved this supper. Every August, he helped hang lanterns between the trees. He carried tables from Reverend Warren's storage shed. He always stole the first biscuit before the prayer and claimed God would forgive him because he was hungry. The memory nearly broke her. Rachel lowered her eyes. Not today. She would not cry in front of people who had already decided her brother was guilty. A woman stopped behind her. Rachel recognized the voice before she looked up. Jacob took $35 from us. It was Mary Collins, the wife of a silver miner. Rachel swallowed. I know what the sheriff said. My husband worked 6 weeks for that money. I know. Mary's face tightened. Do you? Rachel looked directly at her. My brother did not steal it. Mary gave a bitter laugh. Then where is it? I don't know. That is what everyone says when they want to protect family. Mary walked away. Rachel remained still. Across the yard, Sheriff Holt stood beside Everett Sloan, owner of Cedar Hollow Bank. Sloan wore a fine gray coat despite the heat. His beard was neatly trimmed, his boots polished, his silver watch chain shining against his vest. He looked respectable. That was what people always said about him. Sheriff Holt leaned close and said something that made Sloan smile. Then hoofbeats came from the road. A lone rider appeared beyond the church fence. He rode a dark chestnut horse covered with trail dust. The man wore a worn brown hat, a tan coat, and black gloves tucked into his belt. He looked to be somewhere in his middle 30s, broad across the shoulders, with a face shaped by sun, wind, and long miles. He slowed near the gate. His eyes moved over the gathering. Then they stopped on Rachel. More exactly, they stopped on the empty space around her. The stranger dismounted. He tied his horse to the fence, removed his gloves, and walked toward the tables. Several people watched him. Rachel did not. She assumed he would choose another seat like everyone else. Then Wood scraped across dirt. She looked up. The cowboy had taken a short bench from another table and dragged it until it rested directly beside hers. He sat. Rachel stared at him. He reached for a clean tin plate. "Afternoon, ma'am." "Afternoon." He nodded toward the preserves. "Those yours?" "Yes." "What kind?" "Wild plum." "Any good?" For the first time all day, Rachel almost smiled. "I wouldn't have brought them if they were." "That sounds promising." He spooned a little onto his biscuit, tasted it, then nodded with serious approval. "Best thing on this table." "You haven't tried anything else." "Don't need to." A few people nearby heard him. Rachel noticed their looks. "So you really don't know who I am?" she said quietly. "No. You should probably ask." The cowboy broke another piece from his biscuit. "I already know enough." Rachel frowned. "What do you know?" He looked across the tables. "I know there were plenty of open seats until you arrived. Then somehow every seat around you became dangerous." Rachel said nothing. The cowboy slid his plate closer. "There's a place beside me." Something tightened in her throat. She had survived the funeral. She had survived the sheriff calling Jacob a thief. She had survived neighbors refusing to meet her eyes. But those 5 simple words nearly broke through every wall she had built. "You may regret saying that," she whispered. "Wouldn't be the first mistake I made." Sheriff Holt approached before Rachel could answer. His boots struck the dirt slowly. "Ethan Cole." The cowboy looked up. "Sheriff." "So you finally came down from the northern range." "Needed supplies." Holt glanced at Rachel. "You picked strange company." Ethan spread more preserves across his biscuit. "Company seems fine." Holt's expression hardened. "You heard about Jacob Bennett?" "Some." "He stole from nearly every mining family in this town." "So you say." Rachel looked sharply at Ethan. "The sheriff did too." "That is not an opinion," Holt said. "It is the result of an investigation." Ethan finally looked him in the eyes. "Must have been a quick investigation." The churchyard became quieter. Holt folded his arms. "You questioning my work?" "I'm questioning the canyon." For the first time, Everett Sloan stopped smiling. Rachel noticed. Sheriff Holt's face changed only slightly. "What about the canyon?" Ethan leaned back. "I rode Red Hawk Pass 3 days ago." Rachel's heart began beating faster. Ethan continued. "Been driving cattle through that country for 12 years. A man could slip from the western ledge, sure." Holt waited. "But that isn't where Jacob Bennett fell from." No one moved. Rachel stood. "What are you saying?" Ethan looked at her. "I'm saying I found blood 30 yards north of the cliff." The jar of plum preserves suddenly felt forgotten between them. Sheriff Holt stepped closer. "You should be careful with stories, Cole." "Wasn't a story." Ethan's voice remained calm. "I also found a broken fence rail with a bullet buried inside it." Rachel felt the ground beneath her change. Not truly move, but everything she had been told suddenly seemed less certain. Sheriff Holt's hand drifted near his belt. Ethan noticed. So did half the churchyard. Then Holt gave a thin smile. "Old bullet, old blood. Mountains are full of both." "Maybe." Ethan stood. He was taller than the sheriff. "But I found something else." Everett Sloan spoke from behind them. "What?" Ethan looked toward him. a piece of paper wedged beneath the rocks. Sloane's face went still. Only for a second. Rachel saw it. So did Ethan. He turned back to her. "If you're Jacob Bennett's sister, I think we need to talk." Sheriff Holt stepped between them. "There's nothing to talk about." Rachel rose fully from the bench. For 7 days, people had spoken for her. For 7 days, they had told her what Jacob had done, what she should believe, and when she should stop asking questions. She looked straight at the sheriff. "That will be my decision." Ethan picked up his hat. "I'll walk you home." Rachel nodded. They left the church supper beneath dozens of watching eyes. At the road, Ethan untied his horse but did not mount. They walked side by side toward the eastern hills as the afternoon sun lowered behind Cedar Hollow. Rachel waited until the church was far behind them. "What did you find?" Ethan reached inside his coat. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, stained with dirt along one edge. Rachel stopped. Even before he opened it, she recognized Jacob's handwriting. Columns of numbers ran down the page. Beside several withdrawals were the same initials. E.S. Everett Sloane. Rachel's hands began to shake. "My brother wrote this." "You're certain?" "I watched him keep books since I was a girl." She pointed toward the numbers. "He always crossed his sevens like that." Ethan studied her. "There's more." He reached into his coat again. This time, he removed a brass button darkened with dried blood. A small star was stamped into its surface. Rachel stared at it. Sheriff Holt's deputies wore those buttons. Her breath caught. Ethan closed his hand around it. "I found this near the blood." Rachel looked back toward Cedar Hollow. The church steeple still rose above the cottonwoods. Beyond it stood the sheriff's office. And beside that stood Everett Sloane's bank. For the first time since Jacob died, grief was no longer the strongest feeling inside her. Fear had taken its place. What happens if they know you found these? Ethan looked toward the distant ridge. They probably already do. A horse moved between the trees behind them. Only a shadow. Only for a moment. Then it disappeared. Ethan's hand went toward his revolver. Rachel followed his eyes. "Someone is watching us." "Yes." "Who?" "I don't know." He looked at the road ahead. "But we shouldn't stay here." Rachel tightened her hands around the folded ledger page. Her brother had not jumped from Red Hawk Pass. Someone had lied. Someone had fired a gun. And someone was now hiding among the trees, while the only man willing to sit beside her carried proof that could tear Cedar Hollow apart. Ethan did not wait for the hidden rider to return. He folded the ledger page, slipped it back inside his coat, and took Rachel gently by the arm. "We leave the road." Rachel looked toward the trees. "My cabin is less than a mile away." "That is exactly where they'll expect us to go." She hesitated. Everything she owned was there. Jacob's Bible. His letters. Their mother's photograph. The little wooden box where he had kept receipts and notes for years. If Jacob found something before he died, there may be more at the cabin. Ethan looked at her. "That may be why someone is watching you." "Then we have to go." "No." Rachel stepped closer. "You said you knew enough to sit beside me when the whole town wouldn't. Now know enough to trust me." Ethan held her gaze. For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then he gave one short nod. "We go fast." They reached the Bennett cabin before sunset. It stood among scattered cottonwoods east of Cedar Hollow, small and weathered, with a porch Jacob had repaired the previous spring. Rachel went inside first. Nothing looked disturbed. That frightened her more than a broken door would have. Jacob had always kept his things carefully. She crossed to the shelf beside the stove and took down his Bible. Inside the back cover were 3 folded letters and a bank receipt. Ethan checked the windows while she opened them. One letter was dated 9 days before Jacob died. Rachel read silently at first. Then her expression changed. "What is it?" She read aloud. "Everett says the figures are only mistakes from the Denver transfer, but I checked them again. The missing amount is larger than anyone knows." Ethan came closer. Rachel continued. "I found withdrawals made under names of men who never signed for them. I have not told Sheriff Holt yet. Something about the sheriff's visits to Sloan after midnight troubles me." Rachel stopped. Ethan's jaw tightened. "There." She looked at him. Jacob suspected both of them. More than suspected. Rachel unfolded the second letter. This one had never been mailed. It was addressed to a man named Marshall Nathaniel Briggs in Cheyenne. The first line made her sit down. "Sir, I believe money is being stolen from Cedar Hollow Bank, and that Sheriff Warren Holt is helping conceal it." Rachel's voice became softer as she read. Jacob had listed 6 false withdrawals. 3 belonged to dead miners. 2 were supposedly signed by men who had been working in another territory. The final withdrawal was for $400 from the Miners' Relief Fund. At the bottom, Jacob had written one final sentence. "I intend to copy the full ledger before Friday and bring it personally if I can leave town safely." Friday had been the day after he died. Rachel pressed the paper flat against the table. "He knew." "Yes." "He knew they might kill him." Ethan did not answer. He did not need to. A sound came from outside. A horse. Then another. Ethan blew out the lamp. "Back room." Rachel grabbed Jacob's Bible and rifle. They moved silently. Boots reached the porch. Someone tried the front door. Locked. A voice came through the wood. "Miss Bennett." Deputy Lucas Ward. Rachel recognized him. "Sheriff wants to speak with you." Ethan leaned near the wall. Rachel whispered he was at the supper. Another voice answered outside. "Lower. Older. Sheriff Holt." Rachel opened the door. Her stomach tightened. Ethan pointed toward the back window. They had almost reached it when glass shattered in the front room. Rachel ducked. A hand reached through the broken window and lifted the latch. The door opened. Ethan pushed Rachel through the rear window. "Run for the creek." "What about you?" "Go." She dropped into the grass. A gunshot cracked inside. Rachel froze. Then Ethan came through the window behind her. "Move." They ran. 2 more shots tore through the trees. A bullet struck a cottonwood trunk beside Rachel's shoulder. Ethan grabbed her hand and pulled her down the slope toward Dry Creek. Their horses were still tied near the cabin. They could not reach them. Behind them, men shouted. Rachel stumbled through shallow water and followed Ethan beneath a line of thick brush. He led her upstream until the voices behind them grew distant. They climbed through darkness for nearly an hour before reaching an abandoned cattle shelter beneath Pine Ridge. Rachel sat against the wall, breathing hard. Ethan checked his revolver. "You're bleeding." He looked down. A dark line marked his sleeve. "Just a cut." Rachel moved toward him. "That is not just a cut." The bullet had grazed his upper arm. She tore a strip from the bottom of her petticoat and wrapped it tightly around the wound. Ethan watched her hands. "You do this often." "My father raised horses." That doesn't explain bullet wounds. It explains stubborn patience. For the first time that night, Ethan almost smiled. Rachel tied the cloth. Why are you helping me? He looked toward the open shelter door. Because your brother didn't fall. That is not what I asked. Silence passed between them. Ethan rested his back against the wall. 8 years ago, my younger brother was accused of stealing cattle. Rachel stopped moving. He didn't do it. No. Did anyone believe him? Not enough people. Ethan looked down at his hands. The ranch owner had money. My brother had a bad temper and no money. Town decided which story was easier. What happened? He ran. Rachel waited. Ethan's voice became quieter. They found him 2 days later near the river, shot in the back. Rachel said nothing. Now she understood. The church supper. The empty bench. The way Ethan had looked at the crowd before choosing her side. You saw him in me. No. Ethan looked directly at her. I saw the people who failed him. The words remained between them. Rachel lowered her eyes. Outside, wind moved through the pines. For the first time since Jacob's funeral, she did not feel completely alone. At dawn, Ethan climbed the ridge above the shelter. He returned 20 minutes later. They have your cabin. Rachel stood. What do you mean? Holt left 2 deputies there. Why? Waiting for us. Rachel opened Jacob's Bible again. We cannot return to Cedar Hollow. Not yet. You said the letter was meant for a marshal. Ethan nodded. Cheyenne is too far. There's a telegraph station at Blackstone Crossing. Rachel knew it. Nearly 2 days south if they used the main road. Longer through the hills. If Holt controls the road. We don't use the road. They left before the sun rose fully. With no horses, the journey was slow. They crossed narrow ravines, dry creek beds, and cattle trails known only to men who had spent years in the high country. By afternoon, Rachel's feet were blistered. She never complained. Near dusk, Ethan stopped suddenly. Smoke rose from the valley behind them. Rachel turned. Even from miles away, she knew where it came from. Her cabin. Orange light flickered beneath the smoke. She stood frozen. No. Ethan removed his hat. Rachel watched the home where she and Jacob had lived disappear into the evening haze. The porch. Her mother's photograph if she had forgotten it. The blue curtains. Jacob's desk. Everything. They burned it. Her voice was barely more than air. Ethan came beside her. They wanted whatever we carried. Rachel looked down at the Bible pressed against her chest. Then they burned an empty house. Her sadness changed. Something stronger took its place. They are afraid. Ethan nodded. Yes. Good. He looked at her. Rachel's eyes remained on the distant smoke. They should be. They reached Blackstone Crossing the following afternoon. The settlement was little more than a general store, a stable, and a telegraph office beside the railroad spur. Ethan entered first. The operator was an elderly man named Samuel Voss. Ethan placed money on the counter. Message to Marshal Nathaniel Briggs in Cheyenne. Rachel handed him Jacob's unfinished letter. Samuel began tapping the key. Rachel listened to each sharp click. Jacob Bennett murdered. Evidence of bank fraud. Sheriff Warren Holt involved. Everett Sloan involved. Request immediate federal investigation. Samuel finished. Sent. Rachel released a breath she felt she had been holding for a week. Then the telegraph machine began clicking again. Samuel frowned. A reply already. He leaned close. The message was short. Marshal Briggs left Cheyenne yesterday, traveling south, expected near Cedar Hollow within 48 hours. Ethan looked at Rachel. For the first time, they had something Holt and Sloan did not control. Time. Then horses thundered outside. Samuel went pale. Ethan moved to the window. 5 riders entered Blackstone Crossing. Sheriff Holt rode in front. Everett Sloan was beside him. Rachel stepped toward Ethan. How did they find us? Ethan looked at the telegraph operator. Samuel's face had gone white. I didn't tell them. Ethan turned back toward the street. No. He watched one of the riders dismount. Deputy Lucas Ward. He followed us. Sheriff Holt raised his voice outside. Rachel Bennett, Ethan Cole, come out with your hands where I can see them. Rachel tightened her hold on Jacob's Bible. Ethan checked his revolver. We can still get through the back. Rachel shook her head. They will keep chasing us. Until Briggs arrives. And if they catch him first. Ethan looked at her. Rachel opened the Bible and removed Jacob's letter. Then she looked toward the front door. I spent a week running from people who called my brother a thief. She placed the letter inside her dress. I'm done running. Ethan studied her face. Outside, Sheriff Holt called again. Rachel stepped toward the door. Ethan caught her wrist. If we go out there, there may be no coming back. Rachel looked at the man who had crossed a church yard when no one else would cross an empty bench. Then stay beside me. Ethan released her wrist. He put on his hat. I already chose my place. Together, they walked toward the door while 5 armed men waited in the street. Rachel opened the telegraph office door. 5 men waited beneath the afternoon sun. Sheriff Warren Holt sat straight in the saddle near the center of the street. Everett Sloan remained beside him, his fine gray coat covered with trail dust now. 3 deputies spread behind them. Ethan stepped outside beside Rachel. Holt looked almost disappointed. I expected you to run again. Rachel held Jacob's Bible tightly against her side. I'm finished running. Sloan leaned forward in his saddle. You have something that belongs to the bank. No, Rachel said. I have something that belonged to my brother. Sheriff Holt dismounted. Give me the papers. Rachel did not move. What happens if I refuse? You're already wanted for interfering with an investigation. There was never an investigation. Holt's expression hardened. Ethan stood slightly ahead of Rachel. The sheriff noticed. You want to die for this woman, Cole? Ethan answered calmly. I've seen better men die because everyone else was afraid to stand beside them. Holt's hand moved toward his revolver. Ethan S. did the same. For several long seconds, Blackstone Crossing became completely still. Then Everett Sloan raised one hand. Enough. He climbed down from his horse. His polished manner had disappeared. Miss Bennett, your brother made mistakes. Rachel stared at him. Jacob discovered your mistakes. Sloan smiled faintly. You think a few numbers prove murder? No. Rachel reached inside Jacob's Bible. But the letter he wrote to Marshal Briggs might. Sloan's face changed. Only slightly. It was enough. Sheriff Holt stepped forward. Give it to me. Rachel backed toward the telegraph office. Ethan drew his revolver. The deputies reacted. 4 guns cleared leather almost at once. Put it down, Cole, Holt ordered. No. Rachel looked at the deputies. You men know Jacob. No one answered. He fixed Deputy Mason's wagon without charging him. He helped Lucas Ward write letters when Lucas first came west because Lucas was embarrassed about his spelling. Deputy Ward's eyes dropped. Rachel continued. You knew him before Sheriff Holt told you what to believe. Holt turned. Do not listen to her. Rachel looked directly at Lucas. Did Jacob ever seem like a thief to you? Lucas swallowed. No, ma'am. Ward. Holt's voice carried a warning. Rachel took another step. Did you see my brother after his body was brought from Red Hawk Pass? Lucas nodded slowly. Yes. Where was the blood? Lucas looked toward the sheriff. Holt's face had gone rigid. Rachel understood. You noticed something. Lucas breathed out. There was blood on the back of his shirt. Sloan cursed under his breath. Everyone heard it. Rachel's heart hammered. If Jacob fell from the cliff, why was there blood from a wound in his back? Lucas said nothing. Holt reached for his gun. Ethan fired first. The shot struck the dirt beside Holt's boot. Next one won't. The sheriff froze. Then hoofbeats sounded from the northern road. Everyone turned. 3 riders came hard through the dust. The man in front wore a dark coat and a federal badge. Marshal Nathaniel Briggs. He slowed only when he reached the center of Blackstone Crossing. His eyes moved from Ethan's revolver to Holt, Sloan, and the deputies. Someone want to explain why a territorial sheriff is chasing the woman who requested federal protection. Rachel almost collapsed from relief. Instead, she stood straighter. Sheriff Holt forced a smile. Marshal Briggs, glad you're here. Miss Bennett and this cowboy stole confidential bank records. Rachel stepped forward. My brother copied them before Sheriff Holt and Everett Sloan killed him. Briggs looked at her. You have proof. She handed him Jacob's letter. Then the ledger page. Then Ethan placed the blood-darkened brass button in the marshal's palm. I found this beside blood north of Red Hawk Pass. Briggs examined the button. The small star matched the buttons on Holt's coat. Holt's face lost its color. That proves nothing. It proves enough to start asking questions, Briggs said. Sloan suddenly turned toward his horse. Ethan stepped into his path. Going somewhere. Sloan stopped. Marshal Briggs looked at the deputies. Take their weapons. No one moved. Then Lucas Ward unbuckled his gun belt. He walked toward Holt. Sheriff. Holt stared at him. Lucas held out his hand. Your gun. You work for me. Not anymore. Holt looked around. No one came to help him. Slowly, he removed his revolver. Sloan followed. Marshal Briggs placed both men under arrest before sunset. The investigation lasted nearly 3 weeks. Federal officers searched Cedar Hollow Bank. Behind a false wooden panel beneath Sloan's desk, they found a second ledger showing hundreds of dollars taken from minors, widows, ranch families, and the relief fund. They also found Jacob's missing notebook. Inside, every false withdrawal had been copied in his careful handwriting. The final page contained one sentence. If anything happens to me, Everett Sloan and Warren Holt know why. Lucas Ward eventually told Briggs everything. On the night Jacob died, Lucas had seen Holt leave the sheriff's office with Sloan and another deputy. He had remained silent because Holt threatened to accuse him of helping Jacob steal the money. 2 days later, Lucas had helped carry Jacob's body from Red Hawk Pass. He had known the sheriff's story made no sense. Fear had kept him quiet. In October, Everett Sloan and Warren Holt were taken to Cheyenne for trial. Both were convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and Jacob Bennett's murder. The stolen money was returned. Jacob's name was cleared publicly. A notice bearing the territorial seal was nailed beside the Cedar Hollow church door. Rachel stood in front of it for a long time. Jacob Bennett had not stolen the relief fund. He had died exposing the men who did. People came to apologize. Some came because they were ashamed. Some came because everyone else was doing it. Rachel could tell the difference. Mary Collins was the first. She stood outside the boarding house where Rachel had been staying since her cabin burned. "My husband got his $35 back," Mary said. Rachel nodded. Mary twisted her hands together. "I said things to you at the supper." "Yes. I believed what was easiest." Rachel looked toward the road. "My brother needed people to ask questions before he died." Mary lowered her head. "I know." Rachel faced her again. "Then next time ask." Mary nodded. Mrs. Edna Parker came 2 days later carrying a fresh blackberry pie. "I moved away from you first." Rachel remembered. So did everyone else after that. Edna's eyes filled with shame. "I'm sorry." Rachel accepted the pie. "Then be the first person who stays next time." Winter came early to Cedar Hollow. With the money Jacob had saved and compensation from the bank seizure, Rachel rented a small building near Main Street. In November, she opened Bennett Dry Goods and Sewing. Jacob's name appeared above the door. Inside were cloth, thread, coffee buttons, lamp oil, work gloves, and shelves of preserves. A small account book remained beneath the counter for families who needed more time to pay. Rachel never forgot how quickly people had decided what her family deserved. Ethan helped repair the roof before the snow came. Then one morning, he saddled his chestnut horse. "Cattle are moving north," he said. Rachel stood outside the shop. "You're leaving?" "For a while." She looked down. "I suppose cowboys do that." "Usually." He put one boot in the stirrup. Rachel looked at him. "You don't have to come back." Ethan stopped. "I know." The same calm answer he always gave. Then he mounted and rode north. Weeks passed. Snow covered Cedar Hollow. Rachel worked. Christmas came. Then January. She told herself Ethan had his own life. She told herself she was grateful for what he had already done. But every time Hoofbeat stopped outside the shop, she looked toward the door. In early February, during the coldest afternoon of the winter, the bell above her shop door rang. Rachel looked up. Ethan stood there with snow on his shoulders and his hat in one hand. In the other, he carried a small jar. "Wild plum preserves." Rachel stared at it. "Where did you find those?" "Bought them from a woman near Casper." She took the jar. "They won't be as good as mine." "I know." He smiled. Rachel walked around the counter. "Are you staying?" "If there's room." She looked toward the small stove in the back of the shop. 2 chairs sat beside it. One held her sewing basket. Rachel moved the basket to the floor. Then she looked at Ethan. "There's a place beside me." For a moment, neither spoke. Ethan crossed the room and sat. Rachel took the other chair. Outside, snow fell over Cedar Hollow and covered the road where people had once walked past her without looking. Inside, 2 cups of coffee warmed beside the stove. Rachel had once believed justice would be the thing that finally healed her. Justice mattered. Jacob's name mattered. The truth mattered. But healing had begun much earlier. It had begun at a church supper, with 8 feet of empty bench and an entire town too afraid to sit near her. Then one dusty cowboy crossed the yard. He did not know her. He did not know whether the town would forgive him for choosing her side. He only knew what cruelty looked like when everyone agreed to call it normal. So he sat down. And sometimes, a life changes because one person refuses to leave the empty place empty.